Hey guys, it's Nick. Welcome to another episode of T-Minus 365. A lot of excitement right now around Microsoft 365 Copilot, but definitely a tough pill to swallow when we talk about $360 per user per year that has to be paid up front. It's prepaid annual terms at this point in time. So in this episode, I want to talk about if this is feasible for SMB and what the return on investment could look like. So I'm just going to show you some calculations that I've been making there, as well as how you can achieve 100% return on investment with only 2 hours saved per month for an individual employee. Additionally, I'm going to be going over some tips and tricks on how to scale out Copilot as far as the adoption, just so you can maximize your ROI in that sense as well too. So if you want to see more content around Microsoft and the SMB space, definitely subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so getting into it here, these slides, just as a preface, are directly from Microsoft. I did not make these. I'm just leveraging and reusing their content that they've shared in the past and kind of putting my own spin on it as far as the dialogue and the things that we're going to look at today. But when we take a look at ROI, we also first have to understand what are we actually going to be spending in this, and you have to understand some of the prerequisites here. So you do have to have in that prereq section one of these license models as far as the base plan goes in order to even purchase Microsoft 365 Copilot to begin with as an add-on. And that means if you have something like Exchange Online Plan 1, for instance, that's not something you can just bolt on. The key piece here with the announcement within the past month has been that there's no minimums that you have to have. So this is allowing people to kind of dip their toes in the water and see what this is all about, have a couple of champion users leverage this within the organization to see how much maybe time they can save or how intelligent this solution really is in the genesis here of the introductory offering. So again, this is annual prepaid, so it's $30 a month, but you have to prepay upfront for the year with $360 per year, and that is something that you can co-terminate with your other existing subscriptions under NewCommerce, which is good, so that you don't have to have a separate billing model as far as the renewal dates, things like that. But it is something, again, that is a tough pill to swallow just due to the nature of the heavier price point. If you think about a 25-person SMB, this is a $9,000 prepaid investment that you're trying to make there if you were to adopt it across all users. But again, with the no minimums, that should be something that you slowly roll out. We'll be talking more about that as we continue through the presentation here. I also want to quickly show here some statistics from Microsoft from the surveys that they conducted across organizations of various sizes. Keep in mind, though, the Copilot specific surveys and feedback and responses are from the early adopters of Copilot. In a lot of cases, if not all, those are enterprise-sized companies. So just keep that in mind as we look at this. It's kind of a skewed lens in that way. But some of these statistics, like you're seeing here, 85% of organizations believe that AI will give them a competitive advantage, was across various different segments in the market. So not just necessarily enterprise in this case, but it's still a very high percentage in that use case from this standpoint. And then from the standpoint of productivity, this is also where we get into the early access program statistics and feedback from those users. These are some pretty high numbers as far as the percentage of users saying that, they spent less time processing email, they save time on these administrative or mundane tasks, they save time finding the things that they need across documents, emails, things of that nature. And then they're able to draft a lot faster through email, through Word docs, through PowerPoint presentations, things of that nature. So it's pretty interesting statistics in that way. And then additionally, from the early findings of Copilot, when we talk about, in this case, users across sales, IT, HR, engineering, and marketing, I'm not going to read through all of these, but they're pretty interesting and they're pretty high on the consensus as far as it being a valuable tool. And I think one that I want to highlight is 1 in 3 had greater than 30 minutes of time savings per day, which is pretty interesting, and that's a pretty high ROI when you think about that and contributing back to productivity, true productivity within an organization versus doing a lot of administrative work or mundane, repetitive tasks that Copilot is really good at solving. I think the other good statistic here that you can see is that 96% would be disappointed if they no longer had access to Copilot. And I would agree with that statement because I actually went through that experience at our organization. We were part of early access, and then we scaled that back to rework our security and legal plan around that for internal use, and they took away our licensing. And I felt like I was kind of handicapped at that point because I had been using that tool. It's kind of like using a performance enhancing drug and then not having it anymore for everything as far as the day-to-day task. Most impactful was me summarizing my Teams meetings with Copilot and not having to take notes necessarily and having all of that written out as far as the action items. That saves me about 5 to 10 minutes per meeting, and I may have 50 meetings per week given my workload. So that was something that I resonated with, and I can see why that number is so high. So as we get into the ROI conversation here, I quickly want to touch on, some of the time savings. And I think this actually is a pretty good study from Microsoft as far as the figures that they put together, because as you can see in the asterisk down below, this is assuming an employee salary of about $70K per year, which I feel like is a good average for the things that you want to see from a time savings perspective on the things that they're doing. And then you can note here that 54 minutes per month is really the break-even point on your investment, because you're assuming the $30 per user per month given the annual cost if you divide that out by each month. And so you're saying if you save at least 54 minutes, that's where you'll at least make back the cost of those licenses in general. If you think about that, the higher you move up in salary, the larger the ROI multiplier is going to be for that. So some of your executives who might be using Copilot might be in that 150, 200, 200 plus salary range, and that's a lot less minutes to get a return on investment. And that is, again, a perception that you're having that is worth that cost as well too. It's not as simple to say that, the higher the salary, the more worthwhile that licensing is in that sense, because you have to interpret that you're saving that time, but you're also funneling that time back into highly productive or strategic work for your particular role. So these savings here, when you see 2.5 hours a month yielding an ROI of 180%, that's a pretty good return from the things that we're looking at. And this slide here also kind of shows more of that breakdown, right? So we have the $70K for the annual cost to the employee, we have that weekly cost, dividing that by 52 weeks in the year, and then the hourly cost, assuming a 40-hour work week. And you can see how that stratifies into these figures as far as the ROI calculations. So I think this is really good from a sales marketing perspective for Copilot to be able to show that and to start asking questions about, how much time do you spend doing X, or how much time would you think you would save if you didn't have to do, email summarization or something like that. So when we think about these types of questions in a real life sense across some of the top suite offerings, this is not an exhaustive list that I'm showing you here, but I wanted to give you some examples of some questions that you could ask, as well as some helpful demo videos of what Copilot can produce to get you thinking about the potential ROI within your organization or as an individual user. So starting with Teams here, you could start to ask questions like how much time is being spent taking notes within the meeting or scheduling follow-ups from that as well. In addition, how much time are you spending recapping that meeting, following up with action items, things of that nature, and really being productive coming out of those meetings as well. It might be that you're not even doing those things today that really create a more productive culture within your organization. The other time is something that is very much prevalent today, I think, in the sense of, having a lot of meetings, not being able to make one or the other, having conflicts. How are you getting caught up on the meetings that you've missed? In this example here with Microsoft Copilot, this is giving you the option here to follow a meeting maybe where you have a conflict and it shows up on your calendar that you are following it. The meeting participants actually get a notification that makes them record or ask them to record the meeting so that you can get that intelligent recap. And then following that meeting, you do get a notification as well too, which you get all of the summary of what was talked about in the meeting, some of the action items, and you can actually interact with the transcript as far as the dialogue goes. Excel is another one here I think that could be pretty time consuming for me. It's developing these formulas within Excel. I'm not a power user of Excel by any means, but I do some basic manipulation, and oftentimes I was leveraging ChatGPT to create these formulas without having to spend hours maybe figuring that out on my own. I can do the same now with creating charts and visuals from data sets. I didn't really have that skill set within there to create a pivot table and do those types of things. Sounds very basic, but that's really where I find a lot of my time being maximized, which you may be able to visualize your data in ways you never have because you don't have that skill set to manipulate it in those ways as well. And then summarization is a common theme with Excel and everything else within the suite offerings with Microsoft 365 Copilot. So I can quickly pull out insightful business insights that you can really derive to make better business decisions. In this example with Microsoft Excel, we have this data set here, and we're asking the model to basically make a new column with a new calculation being formulated within there. And when Copilot's going in and actually creating this particular formula, and again, that is time that you would have to spend, I would say that might take you at least 5 minutes if you're even familiar with Excel in that way, just deriving how you would calculate that. And then it's making the new column after that as well too. So pretty powerful example of something that you can do within Excel. I think the other piece here that we have is looking at Outlook, because we spend a ton of time there. That's often a location where we could spend hours just looking at summarizations, looking at how we're organizing our inbox, filtering out the spam, recognizing what we need to respond to as a priority item that we're being maybe at mentioned, or it's like kind of hinging on us to move forward, as well as how much time we spend drafting replies. Some lengthy emails, we might be spending 30 minutes even drafting a reply to a certain email where we can get a head start with Copilot. That's both on the replying and then new emails as well too, where we want to take recaps from other aspects of our environment, like our Teams meetings or from a document, something like that, and we can increase our collaboration in that way. So thinking about this example, one of the most common you could think about is an email chain that you've all of a sudden been forwarded or CC'd on, and this can actually scan that entire chain for you and perform a summarization of what's most important, maybe for you or what was talked about, so you don't have to spend 10 minutes kind of summarizing that yourself. The last one here is also, I consider it OneDrive, but this is files and folders. That might be SharePoint repositories, that might be Teams channels. But, how much time are your users spending trying to find where documents are located? How much time are they reading and summarizing those where they could do that really quickly? And then how much time do we spend going in and drafting new documents as well too, where you could have maybe Copilot do a first iteration, and then you can go in and clean it up from there and add your appropriate language. That's going to be a very powerful feature. So within this example, we're using Copilot to create a new document actually out of a couple of other documents that exist today. So we're combining all that information to produce a wholly new document, and we're able to see this churn really fast as far as creating that, and then make a suggestion to make this more concise. So we can quickly get you to a pretty good state, and then you can add your own flair on it, which might save you quite a lot of time when we think about those documents in general. For me, I leverage Microsoft Teams and Copilot the most as far as the interactability, and I leverage that mostly for meeting recaps, and it saves me probably roughly about 5 to 10 minutes per meeting. And I'm underinflating these numbers here in the sense of this being a really light example, saying that you have 2 meetings per day, 5 days a week, which is roughly 40 meetings per month. I, in fact, sometimes have 8 meetings per day, and that might not be every day of the week, but it's a lot more than 40 meetings at the end of the day for my month. But if we look at the simplistic example of just 40 meetings a month, saying you're saving about 5 minutes per meeting on capturing meeting notes, sending those in email to users, following up with action items, those types of things that Copilot does really well, you can actually save about 200 minutes per month. And if we look back at our similar example of the input of an annual cost of employee being $70,000, this is roughly 3.3 hours that we're saving as part of this equation, which is equating to, at that salary figure, 274% return on investment. So in some people's eyes, I think they're going to look at this and just say, I don't want to spend the money for this type of investment because I still want my employees to perform these actions manually. I don't really see that benefit coming back to the business. So it really comes down to, what are employees doing with that time that they saved? Are they contributing again back to more productivity, more strategic thinking for the organization? Or are we going into just that employee working less? That's not exactly the output that you would want from this. So I think it takes a certain lens to really perceive the ROI that you would get from this. And that does take a lot of internal training to the organization for adoption purposes as well, which is a good transition into, some of the common questions that Microsoft's seeing here, which I think are relevant as well for SMB. And especially since there's no seat minimum. So it's saying, who do I give my first seats to try to garner a better adoption or to build some champions within the organization? How do I get people up and running quickly? How big is the learning curve? And then what ways do I have to say that Copilot is actually making a material impact on my business or my users to make them more productive? And that value add might extend down to your customers that you're using or interacting with, that Copilot's helping you interact in a better way as well too. So with that, when we think about this three-phase approach, again, this is not my material, it's Microsoft's, but I agree with it largely. I think some of this stuff like creating an AI council is going to be a little bit harder for SMB. That doesn't mean though that you can't create champions within the organization who really are Copilot experts, but also try to drive adoption and monitor adoption within the organization. So they mentioned concentrating the licenses with key teams. So it doesn't mean that you have to start with your high executives that get a higher salary to achieve a higher ROI. You might have teams within the organization that do a ton of admin work that would receive a lot of that benefit and can evangelize that to the rest of the organization as well too. And you want to start small. In my mind, you don't want to say, let's use Copilot for everything, all of our apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Teams. You want to stick with something that, makes sense to the business. And I think meeting recaps is a great way to start because it's wildly valuable. It's a lot of stickiness there in making you really efficient with your meetings, capturing notes, capturing action items, things like that, and then moving on to other things. But depending on your business, you might be heavy Excel users, and Excel might be the highest impact that you can leverage and start to share wins within the organization and share ideas around that as well too. The adoption phase, I think you want to have people sharing, where Copilot's giving them the most time back, where they see the most benefit, the prompts that they are providing to Copilot as well too, to really generate, more of the ROI to them as individuals that extends down to the business. Managing expectations as well. So, how much are you going to be leveraging Copilot day to day, and how is that going to impact the business, impact customers? I think is going to be a big deal. Or if you're phasing this out, managing expectations on, when am I going to get licensing if I don't have licensing as part of the first wave of the rollout, given you want to do this probably incrementally. And then best practices, again, this is teaching users kind of what prompts that we should be using, tailoring it more to the business, and that should be driven by those champions that you've defined as well too, because they should know your business well, but also be early adopters of the technology. And then they have a Copilot dashboard that I'll be showing you to measure kind of how your users are interacting with Copilot, how much, adoption they're seeing across teams or within drafting, emails, things like that. You want to meet on this, just kind of summarize findings, share wins, but also develop, what's our next phase? If we started with Teams, are we ready to move on to more training with Copilot and Outlook and seeing where we can do with that? And obviously publicly celebrating successes. If you can, try to derive, all of the wins that you're doing. Again, coming back to that statistic of AI, being an enabler for business to the point where it's a competitive advantage, that's where you really want to see that as a business as well too. And then you can tier up your licensing because you're kind of building a culture around this as well too from an organizational sense. So Copilot Lab, I'm not going to get into this fully, but it is a resource that they provided to give users kind of general ideas on how to prompt Copilot for getting really important information out of the organization or some of the things that they're doing throughout the Office suite, such as Teams or in Word. So it's giving them a primer, where you don't have to start from your own base. And I certainly would love to tailor that to my business, but this is something that you can leverage as another tool to help in that manner. And then lastly here, we have the Copilot dashboard, which is part of Viva Insights licensing here as well too. As you can see here, this tab that we're on right now, as far as the screenshot goes, is just related to adoption, but we could also see impact and we can see the sentiment as well too. And you can see where that lies across Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Microsoft Teams as well too. So I hope they keep expanding this. There's some drive in the sense of seeing what users are prompting. so you can get ahead of maybe even security and data privacy concerns as well when we see that. But ultimately, when you measure kind of the phase rollout, you want to see how much users are really adopting that to get a better idea of the ROI for those tools, and then relaying that or incorporating that with their feedback as well to see truly the impact within your organization. Okay guys, that's everything I had for you today. Hope that was helpful understanding more of the ROI capabilities for Microsoft 365 Copilot, especially as it relates to SMB. Definitely comment below with any questions you have about the licensing model or anything about Microsoft 365 Copilot in general. And as I said at the beginning of the video, definitely like and subscribe for more updates around Microsoft and the SMB space. I'll see you guys in the next video.